Is it better to keep your money with the big banks, or should you bank local with a credit union or a local bank? What about online only banks? Well, today I'm going to explore three alternatives to banking with the mega banks. And I'm going to give you the pros and cons of banking with smaller banks versus the big banks. Welcome, my name is Kwame Kwade, and this is the Banking Buff, where we give you actionable tips, tools, and resources to help you improve your personal finances. If you are new to this channel, please consider subscribing. So let's get right into it. Today, I want to share 5 things with you. The first one is talk about the dark side of big banks. Number two, talk about the erosion of trust that started with the big banks since 2008 financial crisis. And then I'm going to explore the three alternatives to banking with the mega banks. And then I'm going to share with you what to consider if you're thinking about switching from a big bank to a local bank, credit union, or online bank. And then finally, what to think about at the end of it all. What are the main things you should consider? So, this is a big question that has been ongoing, and especially given the collapse of small regional banks in the last year, a lot of people have been thinking, is it better to bank local? Is it still good to bank local? Or should you put your money with the big banks? So I saw a recent episode on PBS News called Digital Studios. And as I was watching, I realized that they made some very good points that are still relevant today. And so I wanted to dig deeper and understand right now, if you want to put your money, what are the pros and cons of the regional banks versus the big banks? So that is what I want to explore today. So, first, let's talk about the dark side of big banks. Well, we all remember the big banks were built out in 2008, and we thought they were going to really, really change the way they do business and focus on serving their customers and doing the best things for their customers. Well, that has not been the case, especially with the recent examples that we see, especially with Wells Fargo, where we found out recently since 2016, that story keeps getting worse. That they created 3.5 million fraudulent accounts for profit, and they wrongfully charged 570,000 customers for unnecessary auto insurance. And it was a story that kept ballooning and ballooning and ballooning. Even in my personal experience, I can tell you how many times I've received in the mail, because I used to bank with Wells Fargo and had many, many accounts with them. And every few weeks, I'll receive another letter offering me a free check for something that they did wrong back then. I don't bank with them anymore. But it just goes to show you that there were so many wrongdoings by this bank that I got about 5 different checks over probably a 6 month period, when they keep finding errors of things that they had charged me for or shouldn't have charged me for that they did, or overcharged me for something, or forgot to credit me for something. And the letters keep coming and coming and coming with apologies and a check for me to clear. But it just goes to show we don't know what is happening behind the scenes if you're not paying attention to what some of these big banks are doing, especially with what happens to Wells Fargo. We don't know how big this issue is if we can find out that 3.5 million fraudulent accounts were opened by one big bank. So that is food for thought. Also, the other side of this is the whole financial collapse of 2008, where the banks, the big banks, and the bets that they made, the fraudulent bets that they made, brought the entire economy and the world economy down, and a near collapse of the global financial systems. I mean, if you all remember what happened 15 years ago with Lehman Brothers going bankrupt and all the things that came with the mortgage industry, mortgage backed securities, giving loans to people that did not qualify to just pad their books, and how it affected everybody. And that was caused by the big banks. And that dramatic fall of Lehman Brothers contributed to a lot of pain for a lot of people, and a lot of innocent people were caught up in that, because even the people who did things right found themselves on the wrong side of things because the entire economy came crumbling down and everybody was affected because of the greed and the irresponsibility that happened with these big Wall Street banks that only cared about profits and were willing to do anything to be able to get to that profit. Next, when we talk about the big banks, the dark side of the big banks, remember the bailout where the US government bailed out Wall Street banks. And then what did they turn around to do? They started giving out big bonuses and pay packages to their executives, even 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 during the period where you would think they would take a pause and say, okay, we got bailed out. Let's give it a little bit of breather. But in this report that came out from CBS News in 2008, it found that 1.6 billion of the bank bailout went to executives. I mean, so the point is not to paint all big banks as bad. The point is that we have a history with these big banks that recently in the last 20 years has not been very good. So when you are considering banking with a big bank, there are certain things that you need to think about. And one of them is the history that we as a society have had with these banks. Even though they have their own advantages, there are advantages with banking with a big bank, but there are also these things that have come up where they have been responsible not only for bringing the entire economy down, but for ignoring the fact that they were bailed out and still giving out big bonuses to executives, and then also realizing that these big banks have been doing things behind our back, creating accounts that we didn't ask them to create. In the case of Wells Fargo, which is one of the biggest banks in the country, if not the biggest. So as a result of all that, there's been an erosion of trust with these big banks. A Gallup poll that came out in 2016 found that the trust in big banks, when we say banks in this country, we're talking about the big banks, is at an all time low, is at 27%. And if you dig deeper into that number, you will see that the collapse of the trust started after the 2008 banking crisis. If you look at this chart from the Gallup organization, you will see that it started to collapse after the 2008 crisis because they were responsible for bringing the entire world economy down. And you can see that it hadn't really, I mean, it's recovered a little bit, but I mean, it used to be 53% around 2005. It has not recovered above 20%. It's still in the 20s and has stuck there ever since the financial crisis happened in 2008. So there is not a lot of public confidence in these big banks. So what should you do? Where should you put your money? Well, one of the things you can explore is local banks. The benefits of local banks is that they offer lower fees compared to the national banks. They focus on investing in the local economy or investing in projects in your local community. They create jobs and employ people in the community. And they also help with urban development because they're investing in projects in urban areas. There are over 52,000 community banks locations nationwide. So there may be a local bank location near you. So it is worth considering that. The second option is online only banks. There are banks now that are just based online, they don't have physical branches. And what that means is that they're able to provide lower fees because they don't have to invest in bank branches and employees in branches and all the things that come with having a physical branch, security and all that. They have no minimums. Usually they have no overdraft fees and they have free ATM networks nationwide to compensate for the fact that they don't have physical locations. And their deposits are also FDIC insured. So banking with an online only bank is is probably an option you should also consider because they have some of the benefits that you can get with a local bank. The only thing is that you cannot go into a branch because they don't have physical branches, but they offer some of the same services and benefits that come with local banks. The third option is a credit union. Credit union provide deposit, loans, credit card services like big banks, and they operate as non-profits. So they are mainly aimed at benefiting their members. So they are not, I mean, they do make profits, but they are operating with the sole aim of providing the best service to their members through reduced fees. They usually have higher savings rate and they have better loan terms because their main goal is to provide best service to the members who are part of that credit union, and their deposits have FDIC like protection like you have with big banks, and it's called the National Credit Union Protection Association Protection. So it's similar to FDIC, so that your deposit are insured 250,000 per deposit, just like you will get with a big bank. So credit unions are a very attractive option to big banks. So now that we've looked at all these banks options, now that we've looked at local banks, now that we've looked at online banks, now that we've looked at credit unions, what should you consider when trying to make a switch or thinking about switching from a big bank, a big national bank, to a small regional or local bank or credit union? Well, the first thing is recently a lot of regional banks and small banks collapsed, and you remember the Silicon Valley Bank was the bank that triggered that. And so a lot of people got anxious about that and started pulling their money out of small banks, thinking that it's going to be a contagious effect and that a lot of small banks were going to go under. Well, that has not largely happened. So the question is, should you still consider putting your money in small banks, regional banks, or local banks, credit unions, etc.? Well, here are some things to think about. Well, the first thing is, let's look at the pros and cons of small regional banks and credit unions. The first pro, which I have in green, is that they offer lower fees. You are likely to get low fees. Some of them have no monthly fees at all. I bank with two banks right now, two local banks here that have no minimum fees. And so even if it's $12 or $15, I'm saving that every month. And if you're being charged $12 monthly fees and your bank doesn't have any monthly fees, you multiply that by 12 and it's $144. So that's a lot of money to save in a year in fees alone, in just monthly fees. Small banks have more localized service. When I go to my local bank, they know me by name. And so if I have an issue, I can go to somebody. I know who to go to. I know the personal banker that I can go to that can help me with my problem. They welcome you. Versus if you have a national bank, you may go to a local branch, but they'll give you a phone number to call. And then you enter a rabbit hole that maybe take a while. So it takes that personal level of service there. A local bank is also convenient in terms of being having proximity and a lot of local branches that you can go to. And they're also willing to bend over backwards to help. They will do their best to win your business versus a national bank that may just see you as a number. So that's something also to think about. And a lot of local community banks and credit unions are more community oriented. They always want to show that they are part of the community. They are doing things to benefit the community. They are promoting and sponsoring projects and financing projects that benefits and uplifts the local community. But with all these pros, there are cons. So, what are the cons of working with a local small bank or credit union? Well, they generally have fewer products compared to the big banks. They don't have as many branches like a big bank. They have fewer ATM and branch locations. And the biggest thing that people complain about is technology, that they don't have as robust technology now that we have all these things about hacking and online theft and things. Some people get spooked about technology, and the big banks can deploy a lot towards that. At the same time, your local small bank have enough protection to be able to make your transactions secure, your online banking experience more pleasant. So it's not night and day. It's just that it's not as robust as the big banks. And then they have more limited customer service. The big banks can afford to do 24-hour customer service. Maybe your local bank may have it during business hours. So that may be another difference. So then, what are the benefits and drawbacks of banking with a big bank? Well, they have a wider range of products, as I mentioned. They usually have more ATMs and more branch locations. They offer better up to date technology. They are greater to work with when you're banking abroad because sometimes they have partner banks or work with other partners abroad that you can get international transactions, which I'm going to talk about in a second. And then they have more around the clock customer support. But what are the cons? They may charge higher fees. A lot of big banks have monthly fees on just the regular checking accounts. They generally offer lower interest rates compared to local banks, and they are more standardized. Like their customer service is just very rigid. Nobody's gonna get up and go ask somebody else for something if it's not right in front of them. If they're not being told to say this. But local banks tend to want to dig a little deeper and see if they can find a way to help you. Regional big banks, if you have a big bank, they are not a community bank. So even though they may claim they are local, they don't behave as if they're part of the community. They're a big bank. Your local bank they're people, they're community oriented, they live in the community, they want to see the community grow. So that's a big difference. And when it comes to big banks, they're less flexible. The rules are the rules, and they hardly make any exceptions to win your business. So those are the pros and cons if you're trying to think about whether you should do that or not. One of the biggest advantages of big banks is that if you're traveling abroad and you frequently travel abroad and you do transact, especially when it comes to business, cross-border business transactions, or you need to send money or do transactions overseas, or you're in business and you need to, pay somebody abroad, or you need to transact with somebody abroad, buy goods and services from overseas, big banks have more options and infrastructure to deal with that versus local banks. So if that is something that you're into, before you switch to a local bank or a credit union, make sure that they can meet your international banking needs. So, having said all that, what should you think about? What are the things you should consider if you're trying to switch between a local bank to a big bank or a big bank to a local bank? Well, as I said, this whole presentation was about comparing three alternatives to big mega banks, and that is local banks, credit unions, and online only banks. Well, the issue that I talked about is that the big banks have trust issues. They've done a lot of things in the last 20 years that has given us a pause, and sometimes selfishly, things that have the potential to bring the entire economy down, and it has, or opening accounts in customers' name that were not authorized, or paying the executives these humongous bonuses when they've even been billed out by the taxpayer. So there are trust issues there. At the same time, they have some benefits that the local banks don't have. If you are exploring local banks, just understand weigh the advantages and disadvantages, people investing in your community, the personal experience, being able to have more flexibility in your banking, knowing that they can go above and beyond to win your business or make exceptions to accommodate something that you're trying to get accomplished, versus the relationship you're going to have with a big bank that may have more technology, more branches, more ATMs, but comes with less personalized service and more rigid requirements, and very, very seldom willing to break their rules or bend the rules or make exceptions to accommodate any particular unique situation that you may have that you are trying to get help with. So, that is the comparison between big banks and the three alternatives. I hope this was helpful to you. If you have any questions at all about banking, credit or prepaid cards, or personal finance questions, at Banking Buff, we want to be the place where you get actionable tools, resources, and tips to improve your personal finance and improve your financial situation. So, hit us in the comment section, ask any question or comment about this particular video or any else video we may have posted in the future. If you are new to this channel, I want to urge you to subscribe so that you'll be the first to know when we release these action-packed videos that can help you improve your personal financial situation. So until I see you in the next video, thank you for watching.